All right, we can just hold them there and get a good count.
I've already counted them. Thank
Have
you.
you? Okay, so our secretary, Joyce Walker, is on the ball. She already has the count. Very good. And let's see. We have, our documents were sent, all except for the minutes, because I forgot to send them, but until today, late today. So, Madam Secretary, would you read the minutes really quickly, please?
I didn't know I had to do this, I'm sorry. And,
I know I sprung it on her.
yeah, she sure did. Welcome, Vice President Derek Beecham welcomed those present at 6:10 p.m. and announced that refreshments were available. He asked everyone to pray for President Mary K. Brown, who is ill with COVID and a cold. In addition, he noted that copies of Historical Society documents were sent via email to members, but were also available for Society members, as well as name badges, raffle tickets, and a sheet for anyone requesting additional information. Joyce Walker was thanked for providing the refreshments, and the Louisville Library as a co-sponsor for tonight's event. The business meeting was called to order. Vice President Beecham called the business meeting to order at 6:15 p.m. with 52 persons present. Everyone was asked to follow the program. Members present were advised that the following documents were available for review and approval. Minutes of the September 9th annual membership meeting. Susan Fry moved to approve the September 9th minutes. The motion was seconded by Kathy Ewald and approved unanimously. LHS Treasurer's Report. Richard Mock moved to approve the Louisville Historical Society Treasurer's Report as presented. The motion was seconded by Daniel Fry and approved unanimously. Announcements. Announcements were made following the agenda. Society members were reminded of the membership Christmas party on December 9th. There were no announcements from the floor. The raffle winner of Randall Jones' book was Sawyer Valadero. That was his second time. Now, we're not letting him win again. November program, the Yadkin River, a watershed of history. Vice President Derek Beecham introduced the Society's guest speaker, Randall Jones. Mr. Jones provided interesting information about 4 watersheds in the state and how they come together, specifically the Yadkin River Valley. He provided information starting in the 1700s on the importance of the Yadkin River and the settlement of the area, especially the first Moravian settlers. He even was able to trace very early settlers as far back as 1567. Included in his presentation was the life, legacy, and legend of Daniel Boone and his influence in settling this area. He talked about the plaques that were placed along the Daniel Boone Trail by the Daughters of the American Revolution. He talked about the Battle of Kings Mountain in 1775 and how in 1780 the Battle of Shallow Ford drove the Loyalists back. He also suggested that a book written by Hinton Helper's argument about slave labor not being helpful to small farmers may have been, that's a terrible sentence that I put together, but anyway, his argument about slave labor not being helpful to small farmers may have been a catalyst for the Civil War. There were famous and infamous women who played a part in the settlement of the area. Mr. Jones also invited everyone to join the Yadkin River Keeper and the historic community of Louisville. Mr. Jones was thanked for his presentation. Books were available by Mr. Jones. Mr. Beecham announced Greg Cheek will be the presenter at the January membership meeting. For adjournment, having no other business to discuss, the meeting was adjourned at 7:05 p.m. And this meeting will not be available on the Society's website. Respectfully submitted, Joyce C. McWilliams Walker, Louisville, Secretary.
Thank you so much, Joyce, and I really love Joyce's synopsis of the program. I thought that was great. I'm sorry I missed that. Okay, do I hear a, motion to approve the minutes as read by, a member? Sawyer, okay, but, the motion is made by Sawyer. Do I hear a second? Okay, the second is made by either James Stewart or Dan,
I'll give way.
Dan Fry. He says he gives way, so James Stewart. And, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise, and any abstentions. Okay, it is unanimously approved, the minutes for November 18th, 2024. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Joyce. Let me get my papers straight here. The next piece of business is the acceptance of the reports. The first one is the General Fund Treasurer's Report for December 2024. Now, all these reports were sent ahead of time to the members, and you all, I'm sure, read them before you came. And, and also we have the Forsyth County, the committee reports which were on two separate reports. And they included the Forsyth County America 250 Committee Report, the Sales Committee Report, the Community Service Committee Report, Preservation Committee Report. These were all chaired by, these are all chaired by Kathy Ewald. Then there's the Archives Committee Report, Historical Marker Committee, Oral History Project Committee, Internet Committee Report, chaired by Mary Kay Brown. Are there any questions on the Treasurer's Report or any of the other reports? If not, do I hear a motion to accept all these reports? One of the members. Sawyer's gonna do it again. Okay, and a second, Gordon. Okay, Derek, I saw your hand first. Derek Beecham. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, likewise. And any abstentions? Okay, these reports were accepted unanimously by the membership. Thank you very much. Announcements. Let's see. I do want to, talk about some volunteer. Oh, no, I'm just gonna tell about something happened at the Historic Nissen House, which a lot of you know were, the Historic Nissen House is on, is about a block off of Shallow Road near the town annex, behind the town annex. And, the Historical Society has, restored it in 2019, just the bottom level, and then we created another nonprofit to run it. So back in May, we gave it to the nonprofit, and so they are doing wonderful things with it. They have a new halftime manager, PJ Lancaster, and they have plans to make it into a regional, the Louisville Regional History Center, which you can come over there and get information on the history in this area. And so we're working on that. It's not quite ready yet, but PJ does have open hours. She's closed this. She's not having the open hours in January, but starting January 30th and 31st, she's going to be open. The house will be open for anybody who wants to drop in and see the wonderful Victorian decorations. We have new furniture in there. We have a corner cupboard that goes all the way back to Nissen's great-great-grandfather, who made wagons for Old Salem. So we have that piece that we're real proud of. So if you haven't seen it, and she's got a lot of displays up now, some of the catalogs of the wagon works, and you'll be glad to see some of that stuff. So drop by starting January 30th and 31st. She'll be open Thursdays and Fridays 10 to 1, and anybody can come by and talk to her. So, and she'll show you around, she'll give you a tour. So, do that, and also save the date for a Victorian Valentine's event at the historic Nissen House on Saturday, February 8th, from 11 to 2. So that's for children and adults. So go to our website, www.nissenhouse.org, or the Facebook page, Historic Nissen House, and you can get more information as it comes through. We still need a lot of volunteers, so if you have some time and would like to help your community, get to know other people, it's a great opportunity. We need, especially if you're interested in history. The Nissen House, we really need tour guide volunteers. We need rental event host volunteers. We will train you. And we need other volunteers too, gardening volunteers, maintenance volunteers. We just have a lot of volunteer need to help run the house. Also, we're looking for new board members if you're interested in being a board member. The sign-up sheets are over here on the welcome table. The Historical Society committees, we're starting these committees back. Kathy started the Preservation Committee, she's doing the Sales Committee, Community Service. There's a lot we're doing with the archives. One of the things is, we got a donation of Revolutionary War, 22, it's memorabilia, we call it memorabilia. 22 framed pictures or prints, and 15 items of weapons. They're just reproductions. But still, we're going to be using them for displays and stuff, especially in 2026 for the 250th anniversary of America's Revolutionary War. So that's exciting. And so we need some volunteers for that. And let's see. I do have one member information. One of our members, Henry Land, died recently, and he lives in Kannapolis, but he is a wonderful genealogist, and I'm going to be sending the members his obituary. It's very interesting obituary. He's given us several genealogies. One of them is a Jones genealogy. He's related to Sally Jones, one of our members. So we'll be missing him. Does anybody else have an announcement that they want to stand up and tell people about now? Okay, if not, we will go ahead and adjourn the business meeting. Do I hear a motion to adjourn the business meeting?
Motion.
Okay, that was Susan Fry. Do I hear a second? Okay, I don't know, I think it was.
No, Dan. Was that Dan?
Dan went out, okay, Dan Fry. But thank you all for being willing to do that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, very good. So we are adjourned from the business meeting only. You have to stay for the best part, which is a presentation by Greg Cheek, who is, Greg, your chair of the Commission for the Richmond Hill. And how many have been to Richmond Hill in Yadkin County? It's a historic house, it's wonderful, and you, after this presentation, you'll want to go, so I highly recommend it. Let's welcome Greg Cheek. No, we have to have Derek introduce you, I'm sorry. Yes. Rick, I'm sorry, I mean, Derek, I'm sorry.
I'll give my shot at that.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's good to see you. I'm glad that you all come in this nasty weather we've had the past few days. But I do ask you to be careful going home tonight. So I'm going to introduce to you Greg. He's a longtime friend of mine. We've known each other for quite a while. Very fortunate to know him. But here's a little background knowledge on him. Greg is originally from Forsyth County, North Carolina, growing up in Clemens and graduating from Western High School in 1973. He attended North Carolina State University, where he graduated in 1978 with a BS in forestry and a BS in natural recreation resource management. Greg also received an associate's degree in information technology, computer science at Forsyth Community College in 1981. He then pursued a rewarding career in information technology, first with Haynes in Winston-Salem for 18 years, and then with Lowe's Home Improvement in North Wilkesboro and Mooresville for 19 years before retiring in 2017. Greg and his wife Lois married in 1983 and eventually moved to Yadkinville in 1998. They recently celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in July 2023 and continued their life of faith together as members of Bethel Baptist Church in Yadkinville. Greg and Lois have 3 wonderful children, Andrew, Amy, and Anna, who reside in Charlotte, Durham, and Elgin, respectively, with their families, with 1 granddaughter so far. However, after a 5-year battle with cancer, Lois passed away earlier this year in April. Greg treasures his many memories of life with Lois and looks forward to that great day of reunion with her. Greg has no trouble keeping himself busy these days, though. Since childhood, Greg has collected coins, currency, and historical documents. Greg is currently serving as the president of the North Carolina Numismatic. All right. Let's see.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, society, and is a member of several coin clubs in North Carolina. Greg has also become an avid collector of old bottles, jars, and pre-prohibition whiskey jugs for North Carolina. For many years, Greg has been active as one between the states reenacting with the 28 North Carolina troops. He is also engaged in other local historical organizations, such as the Historic Richmond Hill Law School Commission, where he currently serves as chairperson. Greg has also been a member of the Yakin Gray Eagles SCV Camp, 1765, signed 1999, where he was camp commander for several years and currently serves as adjutant. He is a passionate researcher and student of history, sharing with others as he presents historical programs throughout the state. Greg is currently working to complete his first book based on the Civil War letters of Thomas Lafayette Lowe, Lieutenant Colonel of the historical 28th North Carolina Infantry Regiment. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Greg Chew.
Wow, what an intro. You actually said everything I said. Usually you send a bunch of stuff and they just sort of gloss over most of it, but anyway, yeah, I appreciate that. It's a pleasure to be here. I was fortunate to be here in November to see Randall do his presentation. And now I'm convinced of one thing, he's an art act to follow. So hopefully I can do a little bit. He's such a great speaker. He's very dynamic and does a great job. And he always has a lot of good stuff to talk about. So I enjoyed that. So I'm not a member of the Historic Society, but I think I need to go ahead and join tonight. So if y'all can help me do that. I'm trying to get involved in the Clemens organization again, and I know they're struggling a little bit over there. So I'd like to get involved with them. Have so many ties here. So
We will help you, Greg.
well, I'm sure if I mention it, somebody will attack me after the meeting.
Yes.
Don't get away. But you know, it's tough with organizations like historical, genealogical. We're we're struggling to get the younger folks involved, and it's always good to see younger, when I say younger, people younger than myself. But, at age 69, I'm still told I'm a young guy. Right? So, you try to feel it anyway. But, anyway, I was asked, I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can at least activate this thing. See if I can wake it up.
You got it, it's getting
It helps if you turn it off.
it looks like it's getting away. There it is.
I had turned it off.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm here to talk about Richmond Hill tonight, and before I jump in here, I just want to thank Teray, is on our board, sitting here in the middle. She's come here to support me tonight, I think. But she has contributed a lot to this PowerPoint that I'm going to do tonight. I spent a little time the last few days upgrading this thing, so hopefully I've gone through it enough where I've caught all the boo-boos in here. So if you see anything, let me know, because you are the first people to see the updated version of these. So raise your hands again if you've been to Richmond Hill. Okay, so a good number of you. So hopefully the rest of you, we will be able to drag you out there this year. It is out in a remote part of Yadkin County. One of Pearson's students called it the last place in the universe. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. We found that in one of the books that was donated to us, and I'll show you a copy of that. But anyway, being out there away from things, it's really tough. I know when organizations like all of us, we try to get people to come out, and it's really tough when you're out in the middle of nowhere. So we try to do different things, and so I'll show you a few things that we've done over the last few years, trying to spice it up a little bit for people to come out and give them a reason to come out. And then when they're there, we give them a tour, right? So they might be there to hear a good speaker or hear somebody that does a great job on musical programs. But we try to mix it up and do things that are sort of local if we can. So we're challenged. One of the things we're challenged with too is that we don't have regular hours. Like I know with the Nason House, y'all are trying to do that, and that's great. But it's a little hard for us. So we end up doing an open house like once a month from like May until October every year and try to do different programs. So I'll get into some of that. So when you talk about Richmond Hill, I'm going to get into the history of it a little bit. I'm also going to get into our Richmond Hill Law School Commission, which we're all part of, and talk about some of the things that we're doing out there to try to bring it to life. So as we go through this, I'm going to try to talk about other things as well, but you can see I've got a list of things I'm going to cover. I threw this little copy of a parody that one of Richmond Pearson's students wrote. Teray, I think you just rediscovered it somewhere, and this is an actual copy from the newspaper that it came out of, so I think we clipped it out of that. So if you know the old song, Old Susanna, I'll play a little bit for you in a minute. But anyway, as we go through this, I'm going to try to focus on the history a little bit. But this is not just a history lesson today, it's more like what is Richmond Hill today, too. So hopefully when I get done, you'll be more familiar with this thing. But anyway, when you get into Richmond Hill, there's some big things here. In Yadkin County, we don't have that many historical sites that we can really promote. So we're very blessed in a way that we have this hidden gem of Yadkin County. It's a big deal to us as members of the commission. I've been on the commission since 2009, and recently sort of ended up being the chair of it. But we all have this love for the history, and especially of this place, because it is such a special place, just simply because of who lived there, but also that the house was actually fully restored. And I'll show you some pictures of what it looked like when it really came in years later. But it is one of 6 Civil War Trail marker sites in the county. Not too many counties have that many sites. So we were blessed. Francis K. Stevens back in 2008 jumped on the deal where they were doing a half-price sale on these markers, and we were able to pull off 6 markers. She's a local author. She passed away in 2009, but before she passed away, we were able to get 6 of these markers put up and work at our assembly. So she was very inspirational for a lot of us. So we're very lucky that we have that. And I'm gonna talk about, you know, just things unique about Richmond Hill too in here. And you can see some of the high level things here. And I'll just keep moving through this. One thing I always ask everybody before I get started, usually is, I have different versions of this talk. I have the 1 hour version. Sometimes I have the 4 hour version. So y'all want 1 hour, right? I'm just making sure. But anyway, you'll notice that I like the use of color. So sometimes I get a little crazy with a lot of color in the slides. So if it gets a little crazy, I love your feedback. If you tell me it looks too wild, let me know, because I get a little carried away with, I love color. So I'll put it in there. But anyway, before we jump into Richmond Pearson, I want to talk about his father a little bit and how they ended up in this area. Basically, if you see the history of his father, you can see that he was very involved in things that we consider ancient history by U.S. standards today. But you can see here, he was one of the early navigators of the Yadkin River. I can go down a lot of rabbit holes with this, but I wanted to throw some things out here about him and just sort of give you a feel for where does Richmond Pearson come from. And so he's got this lineage of historical significance in his own family and his wife's family too, and I'm going to get into both of those. So one of the things I thought was very interesting, in the very center, it talks about him being a patriot in the Revolutionary War. Well, him and another fellow that were local leaders got together, his dad did, and they were deciding which way they would go, whether they would be loyalists or they would be on the other side. So they had this big, robust argument, and they had a fight. They had a fist fight to determine which way they would go. So Pearson won. And guess what? The forks of the Yadkin militia went against the Tories. And so that was a very important thing. And so when that happened, one of the amazing things happened is everybody said, okay, that's what we'll do. There wasn't really a lot of dissension in the ranks, so they really jumped in there. So they may have, I don't know the exact history of that group, but I'm sure they were involved over here at the battle that occurred over here across the river too, in 1780. But anyway, he also served in the War of 1812, which was interesting. You'd think he'd had enough, and maybe by that time he was a little bit older, but he was an officer type. I think he was colonel, yeah, colonel. But he's buried in Davie County there at the Pearson Family Cemetery. The Cooley Plantation is sort of what used to be where the Pearsons lived, and people say that Pearson's from Cooley, but I don't know if they really called it. Did they call it Cooley even then, Trey? Do you know?
They did after
Okay.
the War of 1812, that's where they.
Okay, so
adopted that.
that's when the name, okay.
That's how the name came.
Yeah, I couldn't remember when the name actually stuck. But anyway, the Pearsons had a lot of land there. I forget how much acreage he had, but he had a lot of land. It was like 1,000 acres or something.
Plus, at least 1,200.
Yeah, so it was a lot of land. So anyway, that's where, I wanted to go through all that because that's where Richmond Mumford Pearson grew up and was from that area. He went off to school, got his law degree, and came back. I'm not going to really go down into that as much today. There's so many things we could get into about Richmond Pearson. But anyway, I wanted to go into that a little bit and then jump in there about his future wife, his first wife. I want to talk about her because there's a tie to here, right? Everybody knows what Panther Creek is, right? Y'all heard of Panther Creek? Yeah, okay. So I don't know a whole lot about Panther Creek. I just know that that's sort of Louisville area. And so Teray dug some things out, and Teray used one of the pictures you sent me. So here's an artist rendition of the Panther Creek house that belonged to her grandfather. I think it was her grandfather. And then, so Pearson met her while she was visiting here, and he sort of noticed her right away and took an interest in her. And then one of the funny things that I thought happened was that after he met her and following her return to Tennessee, she came to visit, he met her while he was here with her, and then she went back to Tennessee. And he was thinking with a friend, he said, hey, you know, if I could get enough money, I'd like to go out there and sort of talk to her more. And so he didn't have the money, so guess what? His friend went through the money. of going to Tennessee. And then they got married. So apparently she must have had some interest too, because it didn't seem like there was much of a fight there. But anyway, she was 18 and he was 9 years older than her. So I can relate to that a little bit. So, but then they returned Rowan County. Everybody know, when did it become Davie County? You know?
1836.
Let's make sure everybody gets it. So 36. So 1836, Rowan got divided up a little bit further. I think Davidson and Davie. What else came with that? I was trying to remember.
Guilford and Randolph.
So yeah, all of that was split out. I don't know if they happened at the same time. I have to pull that little map that you look at. Anybody seen that, the evolution of the North Carolina county map? So it's pretty cool. But anyway, when they moved back here, it was Rowan County, and then later became Davie. Pearson started his law school in Knoxville, and which is interesting. And then he relocated in 1846. So he was there about 5 or 6 years. And I've read some things that basically why he moved to Yadkin County is that it was sort of the last place in the universe. He was trying to get away from the distractions that he saw in his students in Knoxville. Can you imagine Knoxville being the bustling town that was so big that Pearson decided it was way too much, it was too much distraction? And I thought that was a very interesting thing, because you can see where he's talking about that, and that was why he moved his school. And so he had this connection with the Williams family already because of his wife. And so they moved out there, and I think, Teray, is it the theory that they moved into a house that was previously owned by her uncle?
Yes.
And so this is an artist rendition of the house. We don't have exact photos of it, of course, but this is what we believe it looked like. And I thought it was interesting, if you go back, there's some similarities in the house that her grandfather built and that house there. And I don't know if there's any relationship to that or not, but I just picked that up when I was looking at the two photos and wondered.
Well, that house would have been built by Longtown Joe Williams' son, Joseph, whose house was the previous picture.
Yeah, so that would seem to make sense then. So, but anyway, so there's this connection to the Williams family. You got the Panther Creek connection, the Williams family connection, which everybody is sort of aware of today. And then you sort of look at all the relationships that Pearson had with some of the bigger families. There's some larger plantations in Yadkin and Forsyth that these people socialized with each other, and they sort of partied together sometimes and had this network going. And so I just sort of picked on 3 of them. That you had the Glenn family, who I think, from what we've read on this, that Tyree Glenn and Richmond Pearson were pretty good buddies, and so they hung out a lot. And so I'll come back to that in a little bit. But anyway, you had this large plantation over there in the Enum community. Everybody know where that is? The old Tyree Glenn. And then the Williams family, of course, talking about Panther Creek. And then the Benning family was not like friends, but that was one of the larger plantations and owners in the Huntsville area. And I'm sure they had a lot of interaction with each other. But when the war broke out, when Civil War broke out, both the Glenn and Pearson were Unionist men, and Benning was more of a Confederate guy. So I'm sure there was some differences there, but they still were pretty much in the same communities with each other. But then if you move on, I want to jump into his appointment to the Supreme Court. He started in the lower courts and moved his way up, and there's so much stuff I could get into there. There's a whole talk in how he became Supreme Court. But when you start looking at him in the Supreme Court being appointed to that in 1849, I think it was because somebody had stepped down or even passed away. I can't remember. There was a vacancy there, and then he was considered for that vacancy and appointed. And back in those days, they were appointments, not elected positions. So the governor pretty much got it all of those. So one thing I want to talk about real quick, because this will come up, when you talk about Pearson on the Supreme Court of North Carolina, they actually had 2 sessions a year. They had a winter session and a summer session. So at the same time, he is conducting his law school in between those court sessions. So I put that on here too, just so you have that in the back of your minds as we talk about his law school. You talk about, when people went to school there, they came from all over, and he was pretty well known by the time he was teaching. He was pretty much on the Supreme Court, and people were like, what better way to get approval, at the later levels in becoming a lawyer and maybe a judge later, and that's to study under somebody on the Supreme Court and get their sort of sign off. So you actually had to be signed off by someone, and what better person than the Supreme Court Justice of North Carolina. So he was appointed Supreme Court Justice in 1859. I'll come to that. But one thing I wanted to put out here before, I was trying to figure out where should I put this, but he claimed that over the period of his 40 plus years, that he taught over 1,000 people. Now, we cannot identify all of them. We're trying to see what we can do. Michael Hardy is a North Carolina author, and he's working on a book that's trying to highlight all the students. Right now, I think he's almost to 400 that he's been able to document, but we may not be able to document them all. So there was a who's who list in there, and when that comes out, we'll be sure to let everybody know. That's going to be an interesting thing. And so anyway, jumping forward, I wanted to talk about Richmond Pearson's children. They were all from his first wife, Margaret. And if you look there, I've highlighted in blue the ones that passed away before he did. So you've got 10 children, and 7 of them passed away. They passed before you as your parent does. And that's got to be a tough thing to deal with. So 3 outlived him. But then Margaret died in 1855, and there's a whole story about what was going on with her, that she was not well for a while. But anyway, you think about that, back in that period of time, a lot of things can go wrong, and a lot of sickness type things, and that's what some of them ran into. So you can see there's some of them. John Pearson lost at sea. That would have been a tough one. I couldn't imagine what that felt like.
He survived the Civil War. And then
Yes,
later was lost.
that's right. That's right. He was in the war. I forget which unit he was with,
Confederate.
but he's the North Carolina unit. I can't remember which one it was. But anyway, that would be tough. He made it through one of the worst things that's ever happened to our country, and then he gets to sea and dies or disappears. There is a question, and Trey, I don't know if there's much to really talk about here, but Fannie E. and Margaret may be the same person. We're not sure if that's really true, but there seems to be some evidence that may be the case. But anyway, moving on, and I'm going to have to zip through because if we want to get done tonight, there's a lot to talk about. But he married again, this time to Mary Louisa McDowell, and this was in 1859, 4 years later. And the current house that's out there now is the one he built for her around 1860. That's when it was completed. So we'll talk about that house in a minute. But then he served as Supreme Court Justice from 59 to 78 when he died. He died while he was still in office. And there are several things he's known for, and I highlighted those up here. I'm not going to have time to go into all of this because the whole thing about Confederate conscription and exemptions is a talk in itself. The one down there talking about, with the impeachment thing, and in fact, Teray, I'm thinking we might need to develop that as a talk this year, and I'm going to look into that. I think one of the things that people don't realize is he sat over the impeachment trial of Governor Holden at the end of the war, and they had what they call the Kirk-Holden War, and that was in the 1870s, about 5 years after the war. But in that whole process, Richmond Pearson himself had to sit over that trial, over the impeachment, and he almost got impeached himself, which is a whole different story. So I think that's something we haven't really talked about a lot, but I think there's enough there where we can make a program on it. So anyway, looking at the bottom there, he is the only North Carolina justice that can claim appointment and election. After the war, in 1868, North Carolina, all the seceding states had to rewrite their constitutions. And part of rewriting the Constitution, they made this an elected position versus an appointed position. And so, the interesting thing is, as much as he was sort of hated by the higher-ups up in Richmond and in North Carolina, Vance and he sparred a little bit, but Vance and he both were on the same page about one thing, and that was about personal liberty. And that's what Vance was pretty much a backer of Pearson. But also, one of the things they clashed over the most was how to enforce conscription. And so when Vance tried to use the militia, Vance ruled that that was not constitutional, and that's when the Home Guard was created to do the same thing. And then Pearson turned around and said, well, that was unconstitutional too. So they went back and forth on that, but still, they remained very, very much, I wouldn't call them friends, but they were very congenial with each other. And stayed.
Is this final picture, I'm sorry, is that Vance?
Yes, I was gonna get, this is not the Vance that everybody remembers, because that's the picture that was taken of him in 1859, which is a lot closer to the way he looked during the war than the photos you see of him later when he was governor again. So that's a very interesting young picture of him. He was 27 years old at that point. He had already served as colonel in the 26th North Carolina and already been governor. So, you know, it's sort of interesting. But anyway, the one thing that, you know, when Pearson was appointed and then elected afterwards, he ran unopposed. And both sides, whether you were a Democrat or an ex-Whig and a Democrat, which were at each other's throats before the war, they all agreed that he was the best man for the job. And so that's when he was elected the Supreme Court Chief Justice. So very interesting that they had that much confidence in him. And he was well perceived. Looking back in time, he's well perceived from today's standards, but he was also well perceived at the time. Everybody saw his teaching style was unique, very interactive. The students loved him afterwards, you know. And they may have intervened a little bit on this. I'll just add this, that's another rabbit hole we can go down. But when he came up and they were looking to impeach him, a lot of his students stepped forward because a lot of them were already in the legislature and in the government already in ways, and they said, we're not going to do that. We're not going to impeach him. And so they actually killed that in his tracks. So there could have been some momentum that would have led to his impeachment, but they cut it off at the knees and stopped it. When he died, they put a monument up to him down there at Oakwood Cemetery in Raleigh. His students got together and collected that. He's got the tallest monument in the whole cemetery. So anyway, so here's what eventually happened. He died in 1878. He was on his way back to Raleigh to the court session. He was going across the river in the buggy, and his driver noticed that he was more quiet. When they got across into Winston, he was sort of basically unconscious, and he died in a hotel over in Winston on the way back to Raleigh. So eventually he was buried down in Raleigh because of him being the Supreme Court Justice. But anyway, after he died, Mary moved back to civilization. She looked at Richmond Hill, sort of like the last place in the universe, really she did. And she moved back to Morganton. And she died, I think, in 86. I think that's what I found, that she died in 1886. After she passed away, the property was pretty much vacated. There was some individuals that owned it in between, changed hands several times in the 30s and 40s. And then I think the 1940s is the last time we see any evidence of anybody living there. And it had fallen in even by that point. You have a question?
Was the law school held in the home?
You know, that's a great question. The answer is no.
Okay.
Now, he had a separate classroom, and I don't know if I really got into that. I didn't add that in the slides, I don't think, right? But basically, from what we understand, is if you're standing on the front porch of a house, if you've been there, and you look out into the woods over there on the right, just maybe a few, maybe 50 yards over there in the woods, there's a place over there where there's a little line of rocks, and we think that's where that little building was. And it was just a one room, 25 by 20 maybe room that had, benches, maybe some chairs, had a little stove in the middle, maybe had a couple of windows. He liked to sit in there and teach. He would invite his students to come in there and bring their own tobacco with them.
So
He was a big pipe.
if it was so far out in the middle of nowhere, where did the people live when they were in school?
Another great question. So the quick answer is you had Rockford over there just across the river, about 3 miles away. And you had this little community around there that they called Logtown. And there were people that had homes nearby. And then someone would just put together makeshift places to stay in while they were there. You gotta think, they were not there in the wintertime. Right, they were there in the spring and in the fall. So the weather was probably conducive to camping a little bit. We don't know how much of that took place, but we know that there were people being boarded over there in Rockford, which was a sort of a bigger deal back in those days. So, great question. I didn't really jump into that. So, that's something I need to add to the slide, I think. I don't think I've got it in there anywhere. But anyway, getting back to the house falling into disrepair, you can see these are pictures that were taken in the 1960s. And you can see the hallway where the stairs going up to the top had fallen in, the roof had collapsed in. The veneer brick around the outside was pretty thick, and it held up really good, so the original brick is still there. But then, by the 1960s, it had pretty much done its worst. This is the way it looks today. And the reason that is because in 1965, the Yankton Historical Society was formed for the very purpose originally to get the house restored. Then the commission was formed afterwards to become the caretakers of it. And so that's what we are now. We are all the caretakers of this place. And so by the time the late 60s got there, they had just started figuring out what to do. And then by the 70s, some of the work began, and it took almost 20 years from the time they started the commission till the last sort of major part of the house was restored, which was the side porch in '86, I think it was. So anyway, there's a lot of things that have happened to it since then, but if you can see the before and after, there's before and there's after. I tried to get a couple pictures that will sort of show you how much work was done before Teray and I came along and we're on that commission. So it's a big deal to keep it going. A lot of work went into this. I don't know how much money has been poured into this place, but at least a couple of $100,000 or more along the way. And it would probably take triple that to replace it today. We gotta look at our insurance policy. Unfortunately. So here's a view from when you enter down from the main road in. It's called Law School Road. I don't think that was there back in those days, but there's that's one of the trail markers that's there, and then the front of the house, and then some of the belongings inside. Tried to grab a few photos, some of the things we try to do on the inside to sort of portray what it might have looked like a little bit. We don't have all the original furniture, but in fact, I think there's only one original piece of furniture, and that was the bed that Pearson slept in. Not aware of any other pieces of furniture, but we have had several pieces donated to us. I think we got that bed after the fact because there were some people locally that saw it in an auction, bought it, and then eventually donated it back to us. So we're very fortunate that that happened. And then you have the outside. The commission owns the property that the house sits on. It's like an acre, and then the deed, we actually have the deed to the house and to that property, and then everything around it, which is several hundred acres, is the county. And so it's actually a county park. And so they have 2 shelters, some trails, and then around the house you can see some of the remnants of, like this one down at the bottom left is what's left of what was a spring sort of area. I don't know if that was an actual house over it, but there was definitely a brick wall inlaid into the side of the bank, and that's where they probably would have kept, their food they wanted to keep sort of cold. So there's a remnants of a spring down at the bottom of that hill. If you come down, if you go up on the house and you go straight down the hill to the left, it's down at the bottom of that hill. We've had different things done out there, like at that same shelter, Boy Scout project in 2017. So we're always getting improvements from either Boy Scouts taking on projects or different things that we get from the county. But, it's a very nice flagpole, and, in fact, I think it's time to replace the flag up there, cause it's a little torn, tattered. Seasonal flora and bloom. Which one does not fit in this picture? Everyone taking kids. Does not fit. The reason that animal is in the middle of this picture is because I named the chicken Bloom. And the reason I named it Bloom is because that blooming chicken chased me up the road. That's what, I didn't say that word, but he looked friendly, I walked up to him and he looked at me, he goes like, "You don't belong here." And he came after me. And I saw how long those talons were, I said, "No, I'm giving him some room." And so, I've never seen him since. I don't know, I think he belonged to one of the farms up the street. Is what it showed. What's that? It could be, but he stood about this tall. He was no little chicken. So, anyway, and he was very talkative, seemed like a friendly guy at first, but he wasn't so friendly when I got close. So anyway, maybe he thought that was competition, I don't know. But anyway, I try to gather pictures every now and then of the seasonal changes out there, and we do have quite a few sites, in the spring. You can see all the flowers that are out there, it's sort of nice. Some of these narcissus out there, they were probably planted there years ago, and they just keep popping up around the property, around the edge. So, we have different things. The one down there on the left bottom side is a cucumber magnolia, which, I don't know where you see many of those around here, but there's several of them down inside the park. We have one of the largest groves of holly trees around. Just one whole valley that's just nothing but holly trees in the understory. It's really neat. You can see it really well in the wintertime. We have the old family cemetery, which is at the far back of the property. It's been fixed up a little bit since this photo was taken. I haven't been back there to see it. I think Andrew Mackey and them got the Boy Scouts back there for a little project. And anyway, it's in pretty bad shape 4 years ago. And I think it has been, a lot of trees had fallen over it and it had just taken off. And I think this is where Pearson's first wife is buried as well. So
It is on private property.
it is private property. It's not, we don't have control over the property. So I think several people have owned it since then. And I think the current owners are probably a little bit more friendly to visitation than the prior owner. So we're hoping that we'll be able to get out there and do a little bit more to take a look at the property and see what's going on out there. Everybody remember this thing called COVID. When that came, we pretty much were shut down for about a year or so. And because of that, it got a little musty and sort of dusty. And, you open the door and you could smell the mold, whatever it is. So we ended up having to do a deep clean of the house in 2021. And I think that was a really good thing that we were able to pull off. And then we've had several things like around the edges of the loft, the windows on the outside, we've had redone. Mark Ditchenko and his crowd got out there and did a lot of good work. They do a lot of work for the county too. And so they've done some really good work for us, fixing ceiling repairs and patching roof a little bit. And then we eventually had to replace the roof, insurance purposes. We had to replace that. And then we had a new heating and air system. And that's probably the first time that had been done in maybe about 15, 20 years. So hopefully we got something that'll keep us going for a while. So anyway, there's a lot of upkeep, like the Nissan house, there's a lot of stuff that you have to think about that goes into keeping it up, keeping the lights on, so to speak. So we have a lot of that. We're very fortunate that the county fully supports us. We get a rather sizable grant from them to keep the lights on every year. We try to do what we can to do our own fundraising. We're always encouraged to do that, and I think it's important. So we've had some local big hitters, the Rotary Club and the Yadkin Arts Council. Back when we were trying to get things sort of fixed up inside, they really helped with that cause, and they helped us a great deal. We actually learned of this Heritage Puzzle Group, which is over here. I guess they're in the Louisville area, really. But they do these puzzles and I didn't bring any puzzles with me, Trey. I could kick myself. I thought maybe I could sell some more puzzles. But, anyway, we do have several puzzles still left, but, this is the exact picture that's used on the puzzle. And, we're talking about doing some t-shirts, and the balls in my court on developing the t-shirts, so we'll hopefully get some t-shirts coming soon. So we're trying to do little angles, whatever we can do to raise money, to keep things going. One of the biggest challenges we have is always trying to, do programs that are interesting, and get people out there and get more people interested. One of the things we do, and I think, I'm gonna go through these, but, we set up our local harvest festival. Anybody ever been to the Yadkin Harvest Festival? Very good. It's a small thing for a lot of things that go on around here about this time of year, but always the third Saturday of September. And so we always have a booth there to, help with the awareness of Richmond Hill. This was the one we did in 21 after the COVID thing. We were finally able to get out. Stan Clardy, local musician down in Statesville, he's been involved in the reenacting body with us, and he comes out every now and then. You notice there's a picture up here to the right. This was from our 2021 open house and Civil War Day. We have the local cannon crew that comes out. They come out and fire the cannon for us, and then Stan sometimes will come up and play music. You notice, you see his guitar up there. You see who's sitting on top of it? That's Bobby Leo Possum. He's got a little puppet that he brings, and the kids love that. And so Stan has a routine he goes through with that. And then, I don't know about the guy down there in the right hand corner. That was pretty serious, mean. Anyway, we'll come back to old Susanna. We're gonna Stan perform this for us, and Teray took this video, and hopefully it'll be loud enough. I tried to turn it up as loud as I could, so we'll have to sort of pay attention. But here's the words. Stan actually put it to the music for us, and we'll see how this goes. Good.
Okay. This is a song that was written by a law student who went to this very school. And thanks to Greg Cheeks for getting this to me.
Actually, too, Teray, it was possible to dig it out.
Thank you for digging it out and bringing it out there. And so here it goes. It's to the tune of Oh Susanna, and I'll tell you why. I come from my native wild, like stone on my knee. I'm going to Judge Pearson's, a lawyer for to be. If my calling on God, if my mistake is sad, and if I should starve to death, the lawyers don't be glad. Oh, Surrey County is the land for me. I'm going up to Lockdown, a lawyer for to be. Second Blackstone I have read, but no light I can see. And whene'er I pick up call, I wish it was not me. My Lord Coconuts will read, he'll clear every doubt. And then I think my mother will know her son is out. Oh, Surrey County is the land for me. I'm going up to Lockdown, a lawyer for to be. I soon shall be a lawyer, and then I'll look around. And when I get a fee to take it, I'll be bound. I'll clear all of you, my boys, drain your pockets dry. And then I'll be just in town, so lawyers don't you cry. Oh, Surrey County is the land for me. I'm going up to Lockdown, a lawyer for to be. Oh, Surrey County is the land for me. I'm going up to Lockdown, a lawyer for to be.
So Stan had too much fun doing that. But he's a really good entertainer. He tells good stories, and he sings a lot of good stuff. But anyway, that song is sort of interesting, and it's a perspective of a student in 1850 over Pearson. And he's talking about what he's going to do when he goes to law. and just sort of making fun of it, get a little parody. But that appeared in the Greensboro newspaper in 1850, and it's such a treasure to be able to find stuff like that. But Stan is going to try to do a little studio version of this. We're going to try to get together and put it on YouTube. So anyway, going on to 2021, I got an interesting phone call about a week, well, the day after we had the open house. And Lee Zachary, one of our representatives in the house, called me and said, Greg, the Judge Pearson, Judge Newby's going to be in town for the dedication of our new jailhouse, and he has asked for a special tour of Richmond Hill. He said, "Do you think y'all can do that?" I said, "What day does he want to be there?" So, what was funny is I was like, "What do we do?" And I had to call everybody. We sort of got together, and a bunch of us went over there. And there's several of us on the commission there, but we got all the local dignitaries. We got the county manager, Martin DeChico, and several political people there. But it was sort of interesting. It wasn't. I really didn't know what we were going to get into that day. So anyway, he had been out to the house back in 2013. I don't think I was there the day he came by. But one thing I figured out real quick, when they got out of the car that day and came up, you could tell he's ready to engage in the Pearson thing. And he's such a historian when it comes to that. And he and Michael Hardy, I think when he get done with his current session as, on the Supreme Court, that he and Michael are going to get together and put out the book on Pearson students. He's going to do the biographical sketch of Pearson, and Michael's going to focus on the students. So whenever that comes out, I asked him, I said, "Would you like to do the first stop in your book tour here at Richmond Hill?" He goes, "Well, of course." Okay, good. But anyway, it was just a pleasure talking with him, because you can tell he and his wife both are so interested in the history of things. But anyway, there's some party shots. I'm going to talk a little bit about that little book that he's taken a picture of. That's the book that we actually discovered, The Last Place in the Universe, and I'll show you a picture of that. But his chief of staff, she was a little upset because they had another appointment to go to, and she couldn't get him out of the house. So what do you do? You tell the Supreme Court justice he's got to leave. What do you do? So anyway, we gave him a few things. We gave him a puzzle. We sent him on his way, and I think he was really happy that we had such a good opening for him. But anyway, we moved on to Civil War Day in October of 22, and you can see there we have representation. There's Michael Hardy with his wife and a daughter over there on the left, and then Nora Brooks, who does an impression of several ladies from that period of time. She's done Robert E. Lee showed his daughter after the war. She's done Stonewall Jackson's widow. She's done Grant's wife, Ulysses S. Grant's wife, and I think she does Lottie Moon as well. She's a school teacher, and so she really studies history. She's really good. Every time she's done one of these, she's just right on. But anyway, she came out the same day with Michael, and they took turns speaking to us that day. And then in between, the guys were firing the cannon once an hour. So the cannon's a big hit. Everybody loves to come out and see them shoot the cannon. One of the biggest things we do every year is the Yadkin County fourth graders come out. And for 3 days, it's organized chaos. Pearson would have been proud. But we have almost 400 kids that come out for 3 days. So we spread them out over 3 days. And so this was one of the groups there. And you can see some of us in the background there. But then we divide up into 5 or 6 different sessions, and we have a little bell that rings, and then they rotate around, and they learn different aspects from that period of time. Like up at the top left-hand corner, they learn how to write with pen and ink. And we had a lot of fun with that because there was a lot of cleanup on aisle 3. And then Teray had her hands full in the front room there talking about the amenities of inside the house. And Teray, I think you told me that the boys were very interested in the chamber pot.
So they found that really very nice.
Yeah, so, that was sort of interesting, we weren't expecting them to be. So anyway, that was interesting, and then, one thing that I try to get into a little bit, is the conscription thing, so they understand what that was all about, conscription and the Pearson's role in dealing with all that, so we try to bring it to life. So there's three other things, I think, where we get into the food a little bit, games, what was the other one, Trey? I'm trying to remember.
Community and, what life was like on a day-to-day basis
Yeah.
back in that time.
Yeah.
And
So the teachers love it, it's a way, it's their field trip that they take, and they get out of the classroom and they get out there, and, it's local history for them. So we're very excited when they come out, we have a lot of fun with it. Here's another thing, I don't know if any of you came to this one back in '23, we did it again in 2024, but, Fletcher Edwards, very interesting rocks that have been strewn all over Yadkin, Surrey, and sometimes up in Indiana. They found these rocks, and they figured out this guy named Samson Fleming around the early 1800s was carving these things and dropping them everywhere. Just like hieroglyphics. There's still not a lot known about them. But he started finding them and collecting them, and so he was sharing what he knew, and it was a packed house. It was really crazy that day. But anyway, that's something that's an ongoing, unfolding story, I think. Here's another open house we had, Sycamore Day. Danny and Eva Castellanos are local musicians, and they came out and played for us that day. It was really nice. And then Tom Perry, local author from the Mount Airy area, he lives up in Virginia. Y'all know Tom? Tom does a lot of books and things. He's a fun guy to be around. The guy on the left here is a fellow reenactor, Dave James. And he set up his tent and everything, and I said, pretend that you're here to see Pearson. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit of something about Pearson and his interaction with guys trying to get out of the Confederate Army. He didn't think conscription, the draft, was constitutional. So he wrote a lot of decisions, and so there were these exemption laws that North Carolina imposed. Said there were certain things that you could get out of the Army by claiming and getting it approved. And one of them was a type of job, some types of jobs. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of talking about all of it, but some of it could have been religious, some of it could have been medical. But the thing is, they were coming to see Pearson in Groves. I went down to the Raleigh archives years ago, and I was told where a few of these exemption letters that were sent to Pearson back and forth were. They were all for Davidson County, and there were over 80 exemptions just from that little batch alone. So there were hundreds and hundreds of people coming to see Pearson. Sometimes they would come and camp out on his front lawn and wait to see him so they could apply for exemption. One of the things interesting about this is that this caused a lot of attention in Richmond, which is where the Confederate government was based at the time. And Robert E. Lee, out in the field, was seeing the impact of this because people were deserting sometimes because of this. Sometimes they were not able to refill the ranks because of this. And so he wrote a letter to Jefferson Davis, who was president of the Confederacy, and said something to the effect, can't you do something about Pearson? Can't you get Vance to do something about Pearson? And he also said, because there are more people camped out in his front yard than are coming into my camp. Now, he's exaggerating, of course, but his point was that they need to do something about Pearson. So Vance and Pearson went back and forth on the enforcement of it, but at the same time, Pearson was allowed to do his job. And to Vance's credit, he allowed him to be the Supreme Court Justice. And if you want to take this as a little trivia point, North Carolina was the only state in the entire country, both north and south, that was allowed to keep the writ of habeas corpus through the whole war. And that's because Vance allowed Pearson to do that. But think about that. Even in the north, they were not allowing the writ of habeas corpus. So, interesting trivia. So, anybody come and see that?
That'll wake you up.
So, I was really wanting to make that really loud, so. I had been in the trenches at reenactments where they had the cannon set up next to us, and I thought I'd gone deaf when I got home. So it was pretty loud. But, anyway, that's an example of what these guys do for us, and they do it every hour on the hour, around there on Civil War Day. Here's another group, this year, we actually added this one, Michelle's, was doing the spinning wheel and showing the kids how that was done. And then, I think what y'all got into the potpourri and,
Feel like the kids make such a.
how to keep the house fresh smelling. Because they didn't have some of the things we have today to stay fresh. Right? So there's a couple, you see a couple of classes coming up the road, that's the entrance to there, and then the game tent there. So we had fun with different things. There's Stan again, he came and did just a bunch of different period songs, not necessarily with the war, but just songs from the period. He does such a great job. And there's Fletcher again. Those rocks. Here we have October 24, Civil War Day, and we had Chris, y'all know Chris Hartley? He's from Clemens. He's written a book on Stoneman's Raid. And Al Perry has also written a book on Stoneman's Raid. So I had them both come out and do opposing stories. They like to pick at each other because one of them, Perry went to Virginia Tech and Chris went to Carolina. And when they write books, they put little references in the back of the books. They had a little fun. So they had a great time. No matter what we do, they have a good time. But anyway, there's Barbara down there in the left-hand corner. Found that, snuck that one in there. But then to end the season this year, we did this volunteer and supporter appreciation day, and we had everybody come out. Invited all the commissioners and the county manager and different people, and we had several folks come out. And we had this really spread of really, really great snacky food. We had some left over, so I had some at home. That lasted for a while. But it's a lot of fun, and we're trying to show our support. How much we appreciated the support that we get. Looking forward, I'm almost done. Looking forward this year, we haven't got our schedule all worked out, but these are things off the top of my head that I think we're going to end up doing. We're going to try to start off the year with a Friends of Richmond Hill Day, where we have a hot dog, and everybody come out and just hang out, tour the house, and grab a hot dog while you're there, sort of thing. And then I'm hoping on July 12th, that if I can't talk somebody else into it, I'm gonna try to do a talk on Pearson almost being impeached. And then, we tried this collector show and tell day. We didn't have any pictures from that today, but we're trying to get it together where, anybody that's collecting anything sort of historical or something just sort of cool, like whiskey jugs. Y'all know anything about whiskey jugs over here? Williams? Williams? Okay. But anyway, I collect shore jugs from Yadkin County. They're sort of hard to find. And then the old Casper jugs from Westwood. But anyway, I had a bunch of stuff. There's several of us there, but we're hoping to have a bigger and better collector show day. It's not where people are there to sell stuff. It's just there where people can enjoy sharing the things they love to collect and talking about them. Sort of network. And then, of course, we have Michael Hardy coming this year. I've already talked with him. He's going to come and talk about a few things, and so he'll be there with different talks throughout the day. And we'll have the reenactors there, of course. So anyway, we try to do what we can to promote. We try to reach out on Facebook a little bit, Instagram a little bit. I'm not a Facebook guy, but I try. So here's some things that we consider ongoing, looking forward. The usual stuff, you get into all the things that it takes to keep the place going. And then projects ahead of us. We've been talking about that old kitchen for a long time, and we've got to get off and get that done. It's going to take a lot of money, but we want to actually restore the old kitchen that was separate from the building into the left of the building. And then one of Wayne Matthews' dreams, he was the chair before I was. He passed away several years ago, and that's how I became the chair. But Wayne and I had talked one time about how it'd be nice if we could reconstruct a long classroom building and use it as a conference sort of center, and then people could come out there for special meetings and stuff, and we could do it as part of our living history out there. So we're hoping that will at some point happen. But guess what it takes? A lot of that. So, anyway, we're hoping that at some point to expand our visitation hours. I don't know if that'll be possible. There's always options to consider, and this is not something we're planning to do, but it's something to consider is, if you became a state historic spot versus a county spot. But that might get a little political with our commissioners. I don't know, we'll have to talk about that one. But that would open up to more regular hours too. We're looking at some of these little mini grants. We missed them this time, but they're little mini grants you can get through the Federation of Historical Societies. Did y'all get in on that? Any of that? It's really cool. So we're developing a Friends of Richmond Hill network. So if you have an email address that you would like to receive whenever we're doing things, I'll be happy to add you to the list. So if you want to come up today and give me your email, I'll add you if you're not already on there. So now, this is what we'll end with. You see up there, the top of the page there, you can see where Saul F. McDaniels, Richmond Hill, NC, the last place in the universe. And I discovered that one day. I had the book. A friend of mine, Mike Cumby, used to sit up at the Cook's Flea Markets. He always had these pile of old books. He'd go through all the states and stuff. And he came across these two law dictionaries that are from that period of time that belonged to the students. And he called me up and they said, Greg, I want to donate these two books to Richmond Hill. So he donated them. I put them on the shelf. I didn't really pay attention to that page there. Then discovered it 2 or 3 years ago. And I went, oh my goodness, look at that. So it's not the middle of nowhere anymore. It's the last place in the universe. So anyway, that was about 3 years before Pearson passed away. So November of 75, he passed away in January of 78. So anyway, that's it. I'm done. How did I do?